Good evening and welcome to this Audit Member Standards Committee meeting of Lichfield District Council, the final one in this municipal year. And we begin proceedings with apologies, please.
Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Richard Cross.
Thank you. And are there any declarations of interest? No. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 23rd of March 2023. Do we have any queries on them, or is everybody happy that they are a true and fair view?
Yeah.
That seems unanimous. I'll sign it as the true copy. Item 4, the accounting policies and estimation uncertainty report, which will be given by our section 151 officer Anthony Thomas. Anthony.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to run through some quick key points in here, and if we've got any detailed questions, James on the screen, you can answer the detailed questions. So the proposed accounting policies are shown in appendices A and B. They're based on a model set that's been produced, and we adapt them for our local circumstances. For 22-23, there's minimal changes, and we mark those in blue, I think it is. Those changes reflect date, so the 22-23 financial year rather than the previous financial year. We have included it. There's an element where it mentions accruals on income and expenditure policy. We've taken a belt and braces approach and included reference to revenue from contracts with service recipients. Although we don't think at this stage we're likely to apply the policy, we've just included it in there just in case. Under the financial assets at fair value through profit and loss, there's a statutory override in place, which means you don't need to recognise gains and losses on pooled investments. The government have just confirmed in the settlement that will be extended for a further 2 years, so we've extended that date to the 31st of March 25. We've updated the name of the trading company, and we've updated that the investment in the trading company will be recorded at fair value. And probably for 22-23, there's probably a couple of points to make on that. Probably we'll take the view that initial investment value will be a proxy for fair value for that year. And the turnover of the company in 22-23 means it's unlikely to mean it's at a level we will need to prepare group accounts. Any other minor changes, such as page numbers, grammars and clarifications, we've also included in the policies. We've also included a little bit on local audit updates. There's been a few recent announcements on that. So we updated the committee on the 30th of November last year that one of the new entrants had been awarded the contract for the next 5-year external audit from 1st of April 2023. We've had it now confirmed following the consultation that that's a company called Assets Audit Services Limited. They have got bases in the Midlands, but they have done a lot of audit work, external audit work in Scotland. So they have got public sector experience, but they are one of the new entrants. Quite a number of the staff are ex-district audit or Grant Thornton employees, and I believe they're recruiting heavily at the moment to have the capacity to do the audit. We've also procured assets to undertake the housing benefit subsidy audit in parallel or concurrently. There's some synergies between the work that the auditors do on the financial statements and the audit of the housing benefit subsidy. So it makes sense to do that. And the other issue is that there's a relatively low number of audit partners and firms that can actually undertake this specialist work. So ourselves, Tamworth and East Staffs got in very early with assets and got a contract in place, and we've notified the Department of Work and Pensions that they are our firm. We also had a recent consultation, which I've mentioned in there, about reinstating the pre-COVID deadline for the production of draft accounts. since I prepared the report, we've had the response from the government, and they have reinstated the 31st of May target or deadline for the draft accounts, which is a month earlier than it has been in previous years. Puts a bit more pressure on finance team and the council to achieve that. The other point I was going to make as well is everybody's aware there's a lot of delays with producing audit opinions, and some councils have got audit opinions outstanding for multiple years. The government recently wrote to all local authorities and local audit firm partners in March, and I'm using the word encouraging inverted here, encouraging us to work together to resolve the issues that have led to backlogs of audits. Not quite sure what we haven't been doing until now, to be honest. It's not for the want of trying to get these resolved, certainly on our part. But yes, so they are encouraging that they want these backlogs resolving. Happy to take any questions.
Yes, Councillor Grange.
Thank you, Chair. Needed to get some in, Anthony, just in case these are the last ones. Appendix B on page 30, when we're talking about critical accounting adjustments, we talk about the contract with Freedom Leisure, which obviously was in-house from the 1st of April. I'm going back in the depths of my memory, but I'm thinking that's the non-adjusting post-balance sheet event, IFRS 11, but that's going to need some disclosure. So can you give us a few details on what the impact was in terms of the TUPE arrangements with the staff? Have they now been TUPE'd to LWM, and will there be the same pass-through arrangement with LWM as there was with Freedom?
Yes to both those questions. I think to be admitted to the pension fund, I think you normally have to enter some sort of pass-through agreement so that the host organisation takes off the risk from the pension side of it. So as I understand it, they've all been TUPE'd to LWMTS, and there will be a similar pass-through type arrangement in place.
Okay, thank you. So it'll be a similar sort of critical accounting adjustment, just with a different third party. Thank you. Page 19, and this is picking up valuation of LWM, and I note your points that investment will be used as proxy, but already the net assets of LWM at 31st March 2022 were sitting at 211 because it's made losses of 14,000. Presumably there'll be more losses in 2023. And for the fair value, as things like the leisure centres have gone into LWM, and we know that the comms function is going in, should the fair value actually be based on the business plan of LWM and what the future cash flows are going to look like? And have you seen a business plan for LWM? Because I'm not aware of seeing one yet, but that might be because I just haven't seen it.
Okay, so for last year, or the year we're talking about for the accounts, the only services that were part of LWMTS were property, project management and landlord services. I understand the current forecast is, and I think Jane's involved in this, is that it will make a small profit or break even. I don't think it's in a loss-making position at the moment. So that investment value I'd expect to stay about the same, if not maybe increase slightly. Now, in terms of the business plan, from 1st of April, you're right, leisure's going in there, disabled facilities grants is going in there, communications are committed to go in there. There is a business plan that has been published through a cabinet member decision, can't remember, relatively recently, which gives the business plan before the agreement of leisure comms. I think leisure going in there. We've requested a new business plan from the company that reflects those services going into it. The way we're trying to work it is so that it's transparent what's going on here with the company is that each time there are material changes to their activities, the board approves a new business plan, that is passed to myself to review. Any questions or ask queries raised, ultimately that will then go to the cabinet members to sign off in the public, and it's in the public arena so that all members and the public can see what activities are taking place, what the financial turnover is, the risks, etc. 6 months after the end of the financial year, we've also requested an annual report which will be presented to cabinet and or audit member standards over in scrutiny, so that you can understand what the trading performance is, what the look forward is, what the risks they're facing are, so that there's a lot of transparency and oversight over what the company is doing. Because from our perspective, finance, we are going to have to consolidate that in for next year. So we're going to have confidence in the numbers that are being used in there.
Thank you. Final one. Accounting policy on page 22. We've got an accounting policy for joint operations. But when we've talked about the cinema arrangement, and I've gone back to the press release in October 2022, we talk about it being a partnership with Evolve Estates, with the investment being on a 50-50 basis. What's the status of that partnership, and would it actually be a joint venture under IFRS 11 definitions? So should that accounting policy be updated to reflect equity accounting for that arrangement?
Yeah, I mean, we might need to look at that one. I mean, it is a joint venture in the sense that it's a 50-50, but it's been established as a limited liability partnership. And as I understand it, that certainly from a taxation point of view, it reflects your underlying taxation position. So, for instance, we're not going to account for corporation tax and things like that because councils don't pay that.
Yeah.
Probably do need to go in that way and have a look at that in terms of whether we need to update that note to reflect the joint venture with the cinema. So, and I will commit to doing that, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Sylvester Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Can I go back to the first point that Councillor Grange had on there, because that was on my list, but under 3.19, and that was the pension risk related to Freedom Leisure contract. It does mention in that point about the pass-through, actually, for Councillor Grange's benefit, so that the process there, but it does also refer to the risk, and it was just to see if it was appropriate at this point to get some idea of what the size and scope of that might actually be. Was the first question, and then my previous one, if I can just go back, was under 3.16 as well. And again, similar question really, it's on the size of those, so we can look at those. They are uncertainties, and I appreciate that very much, but they will go into reported as part of the notes in the statement of accounts as opposed to the balance sheet. But again, just some indication of the size of those really when we start thinking about some of the numbers. Thank you.
So on the pension risk specifically, I'm trying to think whether I think there was a note somewhere in the, whether it's in the accounting document, where I think it gives a, it's not in here. I've got in my head that we're allowing a risk of around £200,000 in money. I think when these employees were transferred to Freedom initially, the pension actually did some modelling as to what the level of risk would be if we wanted to go out and get a market-based bond to cover the risk. And I think it was around 677,000 would have been the size of the bond to cover the risk. So that gives you some perspective of the numbers we're talking about here. I mean, at the end of the day, with the employees trooping into the wholly owned subsidiary, whilst it is a wholly owned subsidiary, a lot of the risk is probably still going to sit with the council, because ultimately it will come back to the council. So probably not too dissimilar. It's just, in theory, we've got more oversight, more control of what happens in the local authority trading company than we would have had with Freedom. So we've got more ability to manage that risk, I suppose. On your second point, I'm just sorry, let's just find this. 316, isn't it? Yeah. So this is more of a general point here about if you can't quantify the risk effectively, it's classed as a contingent liability or a contingent asset. And effectively what you're doing here is you are flagging to the reader of the accounts and the user accounts that there is a risk here. If you can provide financial information as to the level of the risk, you should do. But it tends to be more around then, if I always take the view, if it's more than a 50% probability that the risk will incur, then you start to provide provisions for it. So this is flagging there is a risk here, or there's an opportunity here. However, if you feel it's a more than 50% chance of the risk occurring, you should then be setting money aside in a provision to cover the risk. So it's a general point here about how you would treat those types of issues within the accounts rather than a specific item into the freedom one is.
If I'm just it was on that sort of that nature where it's looking at sort of the quantity that might be involved in those, and again the figures that might be involved. So whereas things we would expect to be on a balance sheet isn't, get that absolutely, but yeah, the size and the scale.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So I'm trying to think of a classic which would be a contingent asset around it. I mean, if you had a legal case, it's a classic one. So let's say you're in litigation with another party and your barrister or your legal advisor has said, well, we think we've got a, I don't know, 60-70% chance of winning this. You might flag it as a contingent risk, but you wouldn't provide for it. However, if the barrister said, well, I think we've only got a 30% chance of winning this, you may well then set money aside to cover you losing the case. So it's a judgmental element based on often very expert advice in these scenarios.
I'll agree with that.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Chairman. I know that the public sector audit appointments has appointed Assets Audit Services Limited, and a quick scroll on Companies House reveals some interesting accounts for Assets Audit Services. First of all, they've grown like Topsy over the past 4 years. And secondly, their revenue versus cost of sales tends to yield a precise amount of money each year, either exactly £100,000, or in the case of this financial year just gone, £200,000, which means their profit after tax is, you know, a couple of tens of thousands of pounds. I don't think I've ever seen a set of accounts that looks like that. So I know that we haven't directly appointed them; it's come through the public sector audit appointments, but are you content on behalf of this authority that Assets is a, well, it's a curious set of accounts, Mr. Chairman, I might say so.
I suppose it's ironic that it's a set of auditors' accounts that you've raised it on. I must confess, I'm totally relying on the LGA and the public sector audit appointment documents that this company has, the wherewithal, the propensity, the capacity and the skills necessary to deliver this service. If they're not able to, and they've won quite a lot of audits, I mean, they've got virtually all of Staffordshire, apart from a couple of exceptions. I think they've got all the large number of Worcestershire and Warwickshire as well. So, you know, and I believe they've tended to pick up the areas where I think it's better suited a new entrant is involved rather than somebody that's more experienced. So I'm placing my reliance on PSAA and the LGA, to be honest.
Thank you. Okay, going back to the report that we've just read, there are 4 recommendations, 2.1 to 2.4. Are we happy to take them all en masse, as it were? They're all fairly straightforward.
Subject, sorry, Chair, subject to just the follow-up point that Anthony was going to look at in terms of joint ventures.
You happy with that? Thank you.
Yes, so there's a delegation, I think, at 2.3, and I can pick that point up and make the necessary adjustment.
Can I have a show of hands, people recommending? Thank you, that's unanimous, Will. Item 5 is another annual event, the annual report of the Audit and Members Standing Committee. Andrew Wood, our Head of Internal Audit.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to present the proposed annual report of the Audit and Member Standards Committee for 2022-23 and seek your endorsement prior to its submission to all councillors. CITFA recommends that audit committees produce an annual report to promote the role and purpose of the committee, account for the committee's performance, evaluate whether the committee continues to meet its terms, and document how the committee adds value. The annual report is in the suggested good practice format and reflects previous reports. Prior to the meeting, I shared the draft version of the annual report with Councillor Spruce and Councillor Ho for their comments and observations. The report outlines member and officer attendance, an evaluation of the committee's training and effectiveness, and the sources of assurance gained by the committee during 2022-23. Following this meeting, any observations and comments the committee may have will be incorporated into the final version for submissions to all councillors. In addition, the work plan of the committee will also be updated, taking into account the items discussed this evening, together with updating the committee attendance information. I'm more than happy to take any questions, comments and observations you may have.
Councillor White.
Yeah, this is quite unusual, this one, Chairman, because normally what we say is the chairman of the Audit and Standards Committee, you know, taking his life in his hands and signing off. But this time, Mr. Chairman, you probably just go, yeah, I'll sign it.
Thank you, Councillor. Absolutely. I think particularly with part of it. At the bottom of page 36, stroke beginning of 37. The annual review of the effectiveness of this committee, and it was rated as 198 out of 200.
Yeah.
I'm very annoyed about the 2. But to me, that says it all. So I'm very, very happy with the report. Are there any other comments, thoughts, or whatever? Sorry, Councillor Norman, then Councillor Stewart.
It is only on the record of attendance. I think it's the chair. So I was a bit annoyed that I'd missed a meeting, and I remember William moving it, as it were. Then I realised the reason. Homage to the Queen. Passing. So what can I say? All I know is that I couldn't make the meeting a week later.
No problem. Councillor Stewart.
Similar sort of observation actually to Councillor Norman there. I think it's an indication of the people on the attendance list as to all of us sat here and wanting to be here and knowing that what we're actually doing is adding value. And I think that is probably the best sign that you can get, and sort of commitment from us as members as to why we want to be here.
Thank you.
I had COVID for one of them.
They don't put that down, do they?
No. Reason
I
for
know.
absence.
Good. Could I have a show of hands on the recommendation that the proposed annual report as outlined in appendix 1 be endorsed, and I send it out to all fellow councillors? That's unanimous as well. Thank you all very much. Item 6, the annual report of internal audit, which again is Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to present my annual report, including the results for quarter to 31st of March 2023, detailing the work undertaken by internal audit during 2022-23. Within my report, I've included my opinion on the basis of work undertaken on the Council's framework of governance, risk management and internal control, and can confirm that it is adequate in its overall design and effectiveness. All weaknesses identified have been discussed with management and actions developed to address these. Also, management also continue to support internal audit. Overall, the year for internal audit has been challenging in relation to the failure to recruit to the vacant senior auditor post and the necessity to procure general auditor services, which came on stream in September 2022. As previously reported to the committee, I can confirm that we have taken up the options to extend the contracts with BDO and eTech Business Services, and the planned work for 2023-24 has been shared with them and work is progressing. Taking into account the challenges faced, I can report that we have completed 85% of the annual audit plan. This included an increase in the number of audits originally planned to take into account additional IT audits. We have 3 audits from 2022-23, which I previously reported on being deferred into 2023-24. And these 3 audits have been scheduled for review during quarters 1 and 2 during the new financial year, and will include PCI, DSS, council tax and housing benefit, and development management performance. We continue to obtain high rates of satisfaction with the delivery of the service, and this is 4.7 out of 5, with 15 questionnaires issued as at the 31st of March 2023 and 10 being returned. We will continue to monitor satisfaction levels, and any satisfaction questionnaires from 2022-23 will be reported when returned in 23-24. It should be noted that performance against other KPIs have been affected, and these are outlined in Appendix 1 of my report. And this was with the concentration on business critical service delivery and the introduction of BDO following the procurement exercise. This has led to the exceeding of timescales in turning around audits at their conclusion. The current arrangements with BDO require both lead management and partner peer reviews to be completed by BDO prior to submission to Lichfield District Council for final quality reviewing being undertaken. So this has led to the delays that we've come across. However, we are working with BDO management to ensure that audits are completed in a timely manner. I've included a summary of the audit work undertaken and the assurance levels detailed, and this information is supported by Appendix 1 of my report. During the year, I'd like to highlight that we have provided limited assurance opinions on climate change, data protection, GDPR, and IT disaster recovery. All these reviews will be revisited during 2023-24, so that committee can gain assurance over the implementation of the recommendations raised and progress made by management in service improvements. It should be noted that this committee has been provided with updates with regards to data protection and GDPR, and that is an ongoing process. Analysis of the currently outstanding high priority audit recommendations is contained in Appendix 1. We have 13 high priority recommendations. However, I'd like to highlight that 4 of those are not as yet due. And all those high priority recommendations are reported monthly to leadership team for review and progression updates. During 2022-23, the Internal Audit Service was assessed for compliance with the public sector internal audit standards, and the findings of the external quality assessment were reported to this committee on the 23rd of March. I can report that as at the current date, from the agreed action plan, 5 out of the 12 actions from the external quality assessment have now been completed. And additionally, of the 6 agreed enhancements, 2 of those actions have also now been completed. A further update and detailed analysis and progress of the external quality assessment will be fed into the quality assurance and the improvement programme for 2023-24, which will be presented to this committee at its first meeting of the new municipal year. I'm more than happy to take any questions you might have in respect of my report and internal audit's performance during 2022-23.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, Councillor Norman.
It really is a comment on page 58, 59, which is the food hygiene ratings there. There's been a press release issued, a news release issued today on the latest inspection. Just to say, I'm reassured by the report that's in there and the results of the inspection. There was a concern that whenever a senior staff member goes, there may be some problems. That's not the case there. That's good. On the other hand, the climate change one, which I've referred to a few times, and we have the internal audit report, does show that we're somewhat dragging our feet on the climate change one. I'm just grateful for the information that's there and that's in there, and then a little bit optimistic there about what's going to happen in the future. But I appreciate that's what you've been told, and for you, Chair, and we'll see how we get on. But they were very thorough, it seemed to me, and I appreciate that. Oh wow! Yes. Now then, you could have asked me as well as chair of the climate change task group about my views on it, because slight hint of criticism there, but really the meeting was delayed. Change of I knew there'd be a change of cabinet member. I knew it wouldn't last, and then I wanted to give that's true. And then the new cabinet member, giving her time to get in. Then wasn't able to do the dates, that 3 or 4 dates that were given. So I'm just saying, by way of a reason for the delay there, there was reasons for that. I was too soft, basically. I was too soft. Well, hey, I was trying to keep it nothing party political, if we can. I did my best.
Very good. Andrew, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, I was just going to.
Excellent.
Yeah. I just wanted to come back in relation to specifically on climate change, because obviously there are a number of high priority recommendations made, which has pushed that over into limited assurance. And obviously from that, those high priority recommendations are obviously being continually reviewed. But again, a number of those recommendations are still not due. So obviously management are working towards progression to implement those. But obviously with the regular review by leadership as well, then that keeps that as a priority when I go to the leadership team to report on risk management and also the outstanding high priority recommendations. So I'm hoping that then when we come to do the re-review in 23-24, and we'll see progression in items around, for example, the action plan and also the cross-departmental working, for example, and also being in relation to sort of the budgetary control aspects as well, that those are supplemented. So again, I've got assurance that those processes are in place and they are moving forward. And again, I can encourage that through my attendance at leadership team on that and keep that as a priority.
Yes, if I was professional about that, not the sarcasm meetings, we'll make progress.
Thank you both. Councillor Grange.
Thank you, Chair. Appendix 1 details out the older high priority items. And I think probably there's a level of frustration that there's still 3 on there from previous fiscal years that would be nice to get sorted out. And it looks to me like the safeguarding issue, not due, but should be relatively easy to sort out, which leaves us GDPR, IT and climate change. A general comment, I guess, for carrying forward to the next committee. It feels like these are issues that are going to be ongoing and developing over the next few years as we migrate more and more of the services to IT and self-serve, as GDPR becomes more of an issue because we've got more personal data stored. Climate change, yes, we've got the initial work to do, but that is only going to get more in the next few years. It feels like, Chair, and maybe this is a note to whoever succeeds you as Chair of this committee, that those are 3 issues that are going to keep coming back again and again and again. So a general comment, but also a question to Andrew. Has this council got the right resources and the right skill set to be dealing with those issues? Because I think we all understand they are complex, they are difficult, but the risk associated with them going wrong is really quite high.
In respect to sort of the resourcing in relation to that, I believe that we've got that right in relation to GDPR, because we've got an in-house GDPR officer, which we didn't have a couple of, well, what was it, 6, 7, 8 months ago in relation to that. I think, again, climate change is one that is developing and moving forward in relation to that. And again, we do have the ecology and climate change manager. So in effect from that, we've got the resourcing around that. Moving on to sort of the ICT implications, obviously that is also an area that is developing at high speed and quite rapidly. We only have to look at the NSCS current information first thing this morning in relation to infrastructure, etc., and possible cyber attacks or whatever on that side of things. So I think we are in a position where we are sort of moving forward in those areas. And again, I think from my perspective, those are risks that are within the strategic risk registers of the council, both GDPR and certainly ICT in respect of that. And again, from the audit planning and the audit processes as well, they are high level risk areas. So these are areas that we would be revisiting on a regular basis, so that you as Audit and Member Standards Committee going forward can gain assurance around that side of things. I think the other side of certainly from the assurance perspective is that on the climate change, for example, I specifically used BDO to do the review on that because I felt that they were more professionally aware to take that forward. We obviously also have a specific IT auditor, specific resource that we buy in as well, which I believe supports both internal audit and also the council as well, because we can ask advice from that person again going forward. Again, obviously within the council there are stretched resources. I think everybody would agree in relation to that. But again, I think part of that, and again, it is part of my role in relation to having those conversations on a monthly basis with leadership team around the risks that are facing the authority. And obviously, as you mentioned, Councillor, those risks are at the top of the list, and we do review those on a regular basis.
Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Really, I was going to pick up on a very similar point as Councillor Grange. I was coming at it a slightly different way, though. On, he says, trying to find the page number, the grid in the opening part of the appendix, page 50 of the pack. It does actually say that. One of the things that quite heartens me is the fact that we're closing out more high
Yes.
priority than medium than low. And that's the way we want that to be. I'm sure we'd want the numbers to be higher. I mean, we've just had that discussion in terms of resourcing, in terms of the resource you've got available. I also think I'm right in saying that when you kind of took over the role a couple of years ago, there were probably more, well, definitely more high priority recommendations hanging around from previous years. And one of the things that we've managed over the last few years is to close out some of those ones that have been around. So I think it's worth mentioning that this is something we are really pushing on and we are making some headway with. Related to that, I wonder if it might be possible for you, Mr. Chairman, to leave a letter for your successor. The only reason I'm thinking is there is no guarantee that any of us will be back. We just had the conversation about how it's been a very good committee for 4 years. Whether you might just leave something just highlighting that this is a huge piece of work that has been ongoing, and just to kind of highlight to whoever takes over from you that there are these ones, and to try and flag that up to the new committee, whoever is on it. I hope there'll be a lot of returning faces, but that's not down to the people in this room.
Well, I think bearing in mind the possibilities of the election, I'll quite happily send such a letter to Simon, especially as the chief executive, and ask him to, whoever is the leader of council, put it on this committee's work for next year. So I will do that. Thank you. Anybody else got any? Because this is the fourth, as you know. You get this same report every quarter updated. This is for the last quarter of the municipal year, and we're asked just to note the report. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the risk management update. Again, Andrew, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to present my quarterly report on risk management to you so that you can gain assurance on the actions taken to manage the council's most significant risks. The strategic risk register was last considered on 29th of March 2023 by leadership team and has been updated since previously reported to this committee in February 2023. Due to the timescales between reporting periods, minimal changes have been applied to the strategic risk register, and these are highlighted in yellow within Appendix 1 of my report. The scoring of the council's strategic risks has been reviewed on 29th of March 2023, and at that time no adjustments were required. leadership team continue to monitor the strategic risks of the authority, and that will be ongoing. As a group, myself and leadership team continue to monitor risks which are on the horizon and include these at the end of the risk register. I'd like to highlight that I've been tasked with a piece of work to look at the requirement for additional strategic risk in respect of medium to longer term potential strategic, financial and operational risks resulting from the insourcing of leisure centre management. Until this has been discussed and approved by leadership team, I've included this on the horizon scanning part of the appendix to the strategic risk register. I'm more than happy to take any questions that you may have.
Yes. Councillor Graham.
Just one really, and maybe a bit of a debate point for us. Bearing in mind what we said previously of the risks of ICT, GDPR and climate change, I spent some time trying to think where climate change would fit in those strategic risks. As not just a council failing to deliver its climate change emergency policy, but if we think about the massive temperatures we had last year when we were up in the mid-40s, the risk of I don't know, floods, rain, whatever. Is there something around here that one of these, I don't think it merits a separate risk all on its own, but is there something that could be done to reflect within our existing risks where the impacts of climate change might sit? And is that relevant at this stage, or is climate change not as bad as we all think it's going to be within the next few years?
I think initially in relation to climate change, we do make reference in second line of defence in relation to SR2 around resilience of teams to effectively respond to further disruption to services, and part of that is obviously linked in with climate change. But again, we can obviously have to take that forward and actually we can have that discussion at leadership team, because I think it would be a bona fide thing to take forward. So I can take that forward from this meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It might be helpful for the new committee to understand what the role of other organisations are within risk management. Because Councillor Grange makes a very good point, particularly around high temperatures, for example. But NHS contingency planning, county council contingency planning looks at things that would have a material impact on life in the district. So let's say, for the sake of this conversation, and it's not a theoretical risk, is that nuclear material is being transported on the West Coast main line and there's a crash. There are plans in place from other authorities to deal with that, but we don't need to think about that risk necessarily, but we need to understand who has that plan and who would implement that plan on behalf of the residents of this district. And I think that would be quite a useful learning point for this committee. So we could say, actually, in the round, we know that the risks that aren't specified here are covered off by other organisations. It's always great to have lots of planning going on, but those plans are only meaningful if those people involved in it know where they are. And I've been involved in civil contingencies for real, where you have a councillor running around like a headless chicken going, oh, you're over there and over there. And actually, fire and rescue teams need to be sorting that out, and the councillor needs to get out of the way. And actually, in addition to that, it's often beneficial for councillors to know what their role is within the risk that's specified, and also any civil contingencies associated.
Okay. What we're being asked is to note the latest update from the meeting on the end of March and receive assurance on actions taking place to manage our most significant risks. We're happy we've done that. Another unanimous, please, Will. Thank you all very much. Item 8 is the annual governance statement. I think that's our senior governance plan. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Each year, the council is required to prepare the annual governance statement, which forms part of the statement of accounts. The statement sets out the 7 principles of good governance as endorsed by SIPFA, and then these are further subdivided into supporting principles. The statement then sets out how these principles are embedded in the council's governance framework. Although it's essentially a review document, we've added a short looking ahead section this time to highlight a couple of key governance considerations going forwards. These being firstly, the composition of the post-election audit and member standards committee, with possibility of a review to determine if an independent person will be beneficial in the future. And secondly, the LATCO, which will need to be monitored as it expands to include disabled facilities, grants and leisure centre development. Indeed, internal audit have confirmed that this will be included in the 2023-24 audit planning process. I'd be grateful to receive any views or comments that the committee may have.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. Just asking the question, not because you pinched my microphone, but there is a reference in there about the council has improved, has reviewed and improved its ONS overview and scrutiny arrangements. Obviously, as vice chair of overview and scrutiny, my chair over there. I don't want to know if that phrase has come from officers. Where does that phrase come from? Because there will be a review in the new year. We're hoping that this overview and scrutiny process and different way of working has worked. I think it can be greatly improved, but down to members rather than the officers or the system. So I just wondered about that phrase in there, which is 7 on page 7 and appendix B, where that would have come from, really.
That is a phrase that was carried over from the last which was approved last year, but I think it is just referring to the fact that the review took place during this current cycle, and you said there'll be a further review in the next cycle.
It's all to do with the chair.
Cheers.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Councillor Grange.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a comment about content because I think the content's great. Comment about presentation, and I think I made the same comment when we were looking at the report and accounts last year. I just find that the way it's presented in the table with a varying number of columns and where it's now going over pages, quite difficult to read and follow. So I wonder if that's worth reviewing before it gets published as part of the annual report and accounts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask Mark, who's probably the ultimate evil question? Do you think overall the governance of this council is the same as a year ago, better, worse? Or are you in a good place?
Or would it be better? Election.
No, I think it's evolving with the challenges to meet the challenges that we've got, and I think from a governance point of view, the two that are basically mentioned in that looking ahead section of the two up and coming challenges, particularly the relationship between the council and the LATCO, and making sure that we have robust oversight and governance procedures in place.
That's a great politician.
Yes.
Politicians are. Very well done. Thank you. We don't need to read them, I don't think. All the three fairly long recommendations. Are we content with them? Thank you very much. That's another. A GDPR verbal update. Is that you?
That's me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
This is an update and a sneak peek into what's coming up in the following 12 months. So obviously we have a change of legislation that's going to come up, it's going through at the moment, so that's ever evolving. So as that evolves, I'll bring you updates, or to the next committee, updates on how we incept that from here and what that looks like for us going forward. There's a number of service reviews that will be going on. So tying into the resource questions, I'll be working directly with Ian. So we'll be reviewing every single service across the board. They don't know this yet, so you are fully informed. So we'll be looking at processes, we'll be looking at all of their systems, we'll be looking at their automated retention, their retention schedules, privacy statements, the works. We're doing a full review of every single service, and we'll be doing cyber management as part of that review. So, and I come from 2 northern families. So if I think I need resources, by golly, will they have it? And they will be in place pretty swiftly to make sure we deliver that. So that's what's coming up. So there'll be reports on that service review and all of the project plan around that. So every service will have about 2 months sort of allocated to them, and we'll prioritise it. HR's coming in first, followed by governance, because they're nice and easy to work with. And that will give me a good estimate of how long things will take to see if I need to adjust it. And then elections in there, so I can do a review of that and get underneath that. So yeah, so there is a full review coming under everything. There's no stone that's going to be left unturned.
Excellent.
Any questions?
Chair, I was going to say,
Yes, Councillor Ray.
I can't not ask a question on GDPR. Where do you think the big risks lie at the moment? And are you comfortable that there's no immediate emergency that needs to be resolved? I'm thinking there, and I suspect we all read it, the Lichfield Live article where there was some non-redacted data from a licensing application. I thought I could see how it happens, but that's the sort of thing that immediately throws up alarm bells that thinks we've got some immediate actions that need to happen.
We currently have a PDF redaction system in place that a lot of authorities do, which is causing a lot of authorities and companies issues. I have found someone that can do this approach to ensure that redaction is better behind the scenes. So that's something we're looking into at the moment, and those alternatives behind that. So I'm aware of that. I'm also aware of some individuals that are less au fait with GDPR than others. So I'm building in at the moment changes to our policies around disciplinary policy to make sure that I can enforce those messages a lot stricter than we ever have. So there'll be significant consequences for that. For those that aren't quite caught up with it, they swiftly will be. So I hope that answers your question.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yes, Councillor Norman. I do beg your pardon. Councillor White, followed by.
He's only got his hand in, with hands up, but
I do apologise.
Steve, please.
it
It
was
hasn't even indicated.
okay. Body language was obvious. Just the phrase there, I haven't quite caught up with it yet. I just wondered why anybody employed by a local authority would not have caught up with it. What's the reason why they are getting that message right from the very beginning, which well, I would have thought had been the case with, particularly with local government as well as companies and that. But I just, it might have been a throwaway phrase there, but it just worries me now that you've said that. So I just, could you explain? Can you help?
There's no immediate concern. I think there's always an element of resourcing being the primary focus of people in the authority. And I think there are occasions where some people lose sight of our statutory obligations around things like FOIs and those things, rather than it being release of information. It's around our statutory obligations to make sure that we're dealing with things accordingly. And it's that where they lack in their judgment sometimes. I'm very quick to point out where their judgment is wrong. And those situations have never escalated beyond me. And I've made sure those are quickly resolved. So there's no risks as such to the authority. There's a risk to my resource, but again, if I ever feel that's becoming significantly impacted, to make sure that I catch all of those things, which I will soon shut up and make sure that I've got that in place.
Just so you've got a system in place where you can pick out these things where there's some signals there that people aren't actually, okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor White, my apologies again.
No, it's not your fault, Mr. Chairman. Pushed in.
You're pointing at me there. When is motorbike accident?
No, so GDPR couldn't have anticipated AI for obvious reasons. I just want to be certain that you are mindful of the challenge that AI will pose to GDPR. I think the EU is taking through next week. I know we're not in that, but I'm pointing it out, Steve.
You can't have any good ideas from the EU.
Potential instructive way of it might provide us with some instruction on how we might proceed as a country. AI is able to reach into everything that's copyrighted and take it and then confect a new document and say, actually, here's an original document that's been made by ChatGPT. Now, AI in a setting like this might be able to reach into the organization's IT, grab something out, use it as material or answers to questions, which is in contravention of GDPR. And I might not be expressing myself very well, but my point is that I think I'm making is that there is a risk to us breaking the GDPR rules, regulations, as a consequence of utilising AI as part of our move forward into a more automated environment. And really, that's word stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, we're frightened of AI, isn't it?
Laura, do you want to come back on that?
No, other than that is something I'm very aware of and something that is in my project plan to review and make sure that we evolve with it.
It made sense.
There you go.
Just all saying.
I just wait for the comments on YouTube.
When you actually speak.
Has anybody else got any comments they want to do on the GDPR item on the agenda? Okay. Item 10, the work programme is really just a confirmation of all we've done in the last few years.
We've run out of things to talk about.
Challenge accepted.
Just before we close the meeting, can I say to you all, what an absolute delight it's been to be chair of this meeting. It is undoubtedly the best committee I've ever sat on. All of you, there's some big hitters in this room. There's some councillors who've been here a long time who really understand governance and audit and the importance of it and scrutiny. And you all work incredibly hard. At every meeting, you plainly read your papers and you ask questions, some of them downright difficult. And that's exactly what you should be doing. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you all very, very much indeed. And in particular, the officers who back us up. And I refer particularly to Anthony and Andrew, who I think are excellent officers. And also the governance and maintenance running Will and Mark. Thank you all really very much indeed. Yes, Councillor White.
Mr. Chairman, Councillor Wilcox paid you a very warm tribute last night at full council, but I think I'd like to table a vote of thanks for your chairmanship over the past few years of this committee. You've established a committee which is non-partisan. There's been no political point scoring at all in this committee in my entire time on it.
No.
And everybody here is motivated by trying to do the right thing for this authority, making sure that it's well governed. And that's down to your chairmanship. You've done it in a non-partisan, even-handed way. You've been a great council. This has been a brilliant committee. And I would like to move a vote of thanks for your chairmanship, Chris, because it's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Extremely kind of you.
I've been a second active informally, actually, Chair.
That really is very, very kind of you both. Thank you very much indeed. Officially call the meeting closed at 6:59 PM.